Hello folks, and welcome back to another Monday Rules episode. Now, before I get started, there's two quick announcements that I've got to make. One, I hope you all had a fantastic Thanksgiving, and second, currently working on a Know Your Ship episode. It's taking a bit longer than expected, and I will try to get it out within probably the next day or two. Anyways, before we get into the actual winner for last week's contest, first the honorable mentions, and in second place, Lord Zath, third place, Kruvinus, fourth, Alderid, and fifth, The Rand. The one Isokaze in the top 10 was done by Svadilari, who did 141,469 damage, 61.7k in HE, 22.5k in fire, and 57k in torpedo damage. Now here's a cool fact. Out of the top 10 entries that I got, 70% were in Isokazes, 20% were in Clemsons, and only 10% in Izislavs. Can we say Isokaze OP? One more thing as well, before I get to the actual winner for this week, is holy crap, I got a lot of entries this week, and so many of them were in excess of 100,000 damage. So guys, you must have been tearing up the low tier battles. I actually feel genuinely in fear for the low tier players this past week. Anyways, yeah, you guys are just absolutely tearing it up out there. So, of course, let's actually get to the winner, and this one's kind of going to blow your mind a little bit in terms of how much damage he did. So, this week's winner is Vit12345 in an Isokaze on the big race map. Now, Vit at the beginning goes straight down to generally where is considered Destroyer Alley, where torpedoes, or Torpedo Alley, depending on which one you prefer. And it's the place where destroyers like to go because there's a lot of islands, good cover, and good ambush spots. The other thing, of course, is the fact that Vit's actually in an Isokaze, and we know that the Isokazes have been doing phenomenal in the Tier 4 challenge. Starting off, there's a Wakatake sailing behind an island. Vit picks him up and sends torpedoes. This Wakatake, however, is not very alert. Kind of sails in a straight line, doesn't really maneuver, and of course, you know what's already going to happen. He's going to turn the corner, and there's going to be torpedoes in his face, and of course, very quickly, first kill. One of the things that I tend to do when I sail as a ship behind an island, and I have a suspicion that there might be a destroyer behind it, what I'll do is I'll sail at pretty much full speed, and then as I approach the island, figuring that if there was a destroyer behind it and it spots me and it fires its torpedoes hoping to hit me when I come out the other side of the island, I'll just cut speed. And what happens is if there were torpedoes launched while my ship was still going at full speed and it's launched at the prediction point, what ends up happening is that I'll have my ship slow down, I'll see torpedoes pass me right by. And that's just one of those little tactics that you can use to help yourself get around islands a little bit safer. And, oh my god, Vit is actually using the guns on his Japanese destroyer. This is something that I don't see that often. A lot of Japanese destroyer captains have this mentality that they should never use their guns. And that's not necessarily true. While it's good to try to maintain stealth, especially when you're dealing with a group of enemy ships and so on and so forth, when you're dealing with destroyers or you're dealing with low HP ships, use the guns. Don't just always go for torpedoes. There are times where, in random battles, where a destroyer had the perfect opportunity to add that extra little bit of damage to kill a different ship, and they just don't do it. And so it's something that really needs to be learned, like when to maintain stealth and when to actually use your guns. One other thing is that, like, recently I've been playing ranked a lot, and in ranked battles, the Japanese destroyer captains are forced to learn to use their guns because they tend to run into US destroyers and Russian destroyers that are, generally speaking, at least at the higher ranks, more aggressive against Japanese destroyers. In fact, if you see a Kiev and you don't know how to use your guns and the Kiev sees your torpedoes, I see those Kievs, they will run you down. So it's better just to use your guns and see what kind of damage you can do. So definitely something that is an important skill and to actually learn when you're in a Japanese destroyer. Vit gets 2 more hits on a St. Louis, taking off most of the St. Louis's HP, although it doesn't actually get the kill. And then, of course, Vit is presented with this. The big, open enemy team where there's no destroyers nearby, and Vit's going to have a bit of a field day. Because the Isokaze, this is the thing about the Isokaze, they are so unbelievably deadly when used correctly against large capital ships, because as a capital ship, you will never spot that Isokaze unless the Isokaze makes a mistake. And in this particular case, Vit really doesn't make any mistakes. It's going to be able to start getting these torpedoes off against these enemy ships. And the other thing, of course, with the Isokaze is that its reload for its torpedoes is also incredibly fast, which means that even if you're able to dodge the first initial salvo from Isokaze, the second one might already be on its way, or at least on its way very, very soon. When I play at the lower tiers, around say tier 4, I generally find that the Isokazes are the things that I actually give the most amount of respect to, just because of how actually deadly they can be when played correctly by the right players. What I want you to do now is I want you to look at Vit's strategy, and it's a great strategy for trying to actually get this challenge. Because what Vit's doing, I think, is trying to do damage, but he's also trying to get status on as many ships as possible. So the Kuma, which is currently AFK on the enemy team, Vit sends one salvo of torpedoes towards it, thinking that if he can get a hit and maybe flooding, there's going to be some damage there, while at the same time engaging the battleships with 2 salvos, and 2 salvos of Isokaze torpedoes is going to hurt. So against the Miyogi, Vit gets close enough to be spotted. There's a pro and a con to doing this in an Isokaze. If you are approaching a battleship and you're getting closer, your torpedoes are going to get to target faster, which means less time for the battleship to dodge. On the flip side, of course, you get spotted, and that means the battleship can actually shoot at you. In this particular case, though, against the Miyogi, if I was in Isokaze, I think I would risk getting close as well, just because the Miyogi's dispersion is so bad that it can miss battleships at close range, never mind destroyers. So if I was in an Isokaze, I think I would take that chance too. Okay, so back to this little bit here, and Vit once again sends another single salvo towards Akuma, trying to secure that kill. Well, again, transferring his attention to other targets. In this particular case, another battleship with really, really bad dispersion, the Kawachi. And during all this time, if you watch Vit carefully enough, Vit has been sailing in a rather evasive way, weaving in and out, weaving in and out. And this throws off the aim of these battleships. And again, like I said, with the poor dispersion, it doesn't make their life easy. That Miyogi finally gets taken out by somebody else, but Vit had already done the majority of damage to that battleship. So, of course, you know, there's no point wasting time and wasting torpedoes on a battleship you've mostly killed. Might as well move on to something with a little bit more HP, especially when you're trying to get as much damage as humanly possible. Vit's strategy, I think, of having spread that torpedoes around and getting status damage, I think that will play a role in the overall damage that he ends up doing. So Vit launches torpedoes towards this Kawachi, and this Kawachi is flooding. And of course, if you look at the medals right now, Vit already has a Liquidator, a High Caliber, a Confederate, First Blood, Devastating Strike medals. So anyways, Vit launches more torpedoes at the Kawachi and begins to close the range. And I don't even think he's closing the range for the Kawachi. Vit's just trying to get closer to the other 2 ships on the enemy team, the Carrier and the Wyoming, because the Kawachi sailing that straight line is going to eat another torpedo and die. So Vit continues on, and of course by this point in time has become invisible again. So this Wyoming is aware that something is coming towards him, isn't really sure where he is though, so of course Vit is going to take this time and send some torpedoes on the way. There is this one thing, Vit, that I want to ask you about, because when I was watching a replay, I saw this particular camera angle that showed a much more zoomed up view, and it's a view that I would like to have when I'm in my destroyer. I want to be able to actually zoom in to see what the ship is doing, and I don't have it, at least on the vanilla client. So if you're using a mod, could you tell me what mod you're using, because that's a really, really helpful mod if you're playing a destroyer. It just allows you to see the target a little bit more clearly. So the first set of torpedoes that Vit sent towards the Wyoming missed. However, the second set towards the Carrier, the Langley, is not going to miss. And of course, that creates another bunch of flooding. Vit sends one more salvo towards it, and of course is going to save the remaining 2 salvos that are getting reloaded right now. Is going to save them for this Wyoming. Now Vit makes what I think is probably the only major mistake in the game, is he gets within spotting range of a Wyoming. I would be okay getting within spotting range of a Miyogi or Kawachi, but a Wyoming with that number of guns generally for me is a no-go. But Vid, of course, had one last trick up his sleeve. Smoke. And Destroyer Smoke is incredibly powerful if you know how to use it correctly, because as long as you're inside the smoke and you don't come out of it and nobody gets within 2 kilometers of you, or at least, with sonar, depending on, how the sonar range, whatever that sonar range is, as long as nobody gets within that range of you, you're going to be completely invisible, which means you can fire your guns, fire your torpedoes, and you can pretty much do it with impunity. Although torpedoes are still spotted by aircraft that are flying over, so do be aware of that. So that aircraft carrier, which had its planes fly over, right as Vit launched the torpedoes, those torpedoes were spotted. That's why the Wyoming was able to dodge. However, next salvo, well, not so much luck anymore for this Wyoming, because within 3 kilometers, there is not much dodging you're going to be able to do against torpedoes from an Isokaze. And so Vit picks up a couple more torpedo hits, and that Wyoming is going under. So that accounted for 17 total torpedo hits. Let's take a look at the results, because Vit gets 2 more torpedo hits at the very, very end against a stationary battleship that was on the border, so it wasn't really exciting. So anyways, here's the results. 236,000 credits, 2,774 experience. Confederate, 2 devastating strikes. Liquidator, high caliber, first blood, 19 torpedo hits, 12 hits with guns, 6 ships sunk, 16 flooding ribbons. So those flooding ribbons are going to account for quite a bit of damage. So let's take a look first of all at Vit's base experience here. On the winning team, he had 2,521 base experience. Yep. Oh god, he had more base experience than the next 3 people on his team combined. Wow, Vit, good job there. And of course, let's take a look at his actual damage totals, because this number is going to kind of blow your mind. In a tier 4 Isokaze, Vit manages 198,338 damage. That's the kind of damage levels that a Shimakaze could be proud of. Good lord, Vit, you just absolutely stomped that team to the ground. That's an incredible amount of damage. But yeah, see the amount of flooding damage there? 34,000 in flooding. So that flooding damage contributed significantly to Vit's damage total. So anyways, Vit, keep an eye open on your email. I'll be sending you some doubloons. And of course, this week's challenge comes from the Freaker86, whose suggestion is a tier 6 battleship max damage contest, which I think is fantastic. And plus, we'll see which of the tier 6 battleships is better, the Fuso, the Warspite, or the New Mexico. Anyways, folks, get out there in your tier 6 battleships. Max damage, all damage counts, no other restrictions. Good luck, have fun, and always remember, Monday rules.